By the summer of 1940, Germany had overrun France and the Low Countries with a speed that shocked most military observers, leaving Britain as the last major power in Western Europe still resisting the Nazi regime. Adolf Hitler expected the British government to negotiate terms after the French armistice in June, but Prime Minister Winston Churchill refused. Hitler then issued Directive No. 16, ordering preparations for a cross-channel invasion codenamed Operation Sea Lion. Before any amphibious landing could succeed, the German High Command recognized that air superiority over the English Channel and southern England was essential. The task of achieving this fell to the Luftwaffe, commanded by Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, who assured Hitler his air force could destroy the Royal Air Force within weeks. So why did that promise go unfulfilled? The Luftwaffe entered the battle with considerable strength. By July 1940, it had approximately 2,600 aircraft available for operations against Britain, including around 1,000 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters, 350 twin-engine Bf 110 heavy fighters, and over 1,200 bombers. These forces were organized into three air fleets: Luftflotte 2 in the Netherlands and northern France, Luftflotte 3 in western France, and Luftflotte 5, operating from Norway and Denmark. German pilots were battle-hardened veterans of campaigns in Poland, France, and the Balkans, and the Bf 109E was widely considered among the best single-engine fighters in the world at the time. The Luftwaffe's central objective was straightforward: destroy Fighter Command's aircraft, airfields, and infrastructure so completely that it could no longer mount an effective defense of British airspace. Britain's Fighter Command, led by Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, entered the battle in a far more precarious position. The RAF had lost approximately 960 aircraft and over 400 pilots during the Battle of France and the Dunkirk evacuation, a deficit it had not yet fully recovered from. Fighter Command could field roughly 700 operational single-engine fighters at the opening of the battle, primarily Hawker Hurricanes and Supermarine Spitfires. Dowding was acutely conscious of his limited reserves and had argued throughout the spring of 1940 against sending more squadrons to France, writing a letter to the Air Ministry warning that if attrition continued at its current rate, there would be no fighters left to defend Britain itself. His conservatism in protecting those reserves would be critical. One of the most decisive British advantages was a technological system that Germany fundamentally underestimated. Britain had developed Chain Home, a network of radar stations stretching along the eastern and southern coastlines, capable of detecting incoming aircraft while they were still over France or the North Sea. Chain Home was not sophisticated by later standards. It could not reliably determine aircraft altitude or type with precision, but it gave Fighter Command warning of attacks, sometimes 20 to 30 minutes before German formations reached British shores. This early warning allowed controllers to scramble squadrons with enough time to climb to fighting altitude, rather than being caught on the ground. Germany was aware that radar installations existed along the coast but did not fully grasp how central they were to the British defensive system. And early Luftwaffe attacks on the stations were abandoned before they caused lasting damage. The radar network fed into a broader command and control structure that became known as the Dowding system. Information from Chain Home stations passed to Fighter Command headquarters at Bentley Priory in Middlesex, where it was plotted on large maps and assessed by controllers. Group headquarters and sector control rooms then directed individual squadrons toward incoming raids, with real-time updates on enemy positions, headings, and estimated strength. This integrated approach allowed Britain to manage its fighter forces efficiently across a wide geographic area, concentrating aircraft where they were most needed rather than maintaining standing patrols that would have exhausted pilots and burned through fuel. No other country at that point in the war possessed anything remotely comparable, in terms of coordinating detection, command, and interception into a single functioning system. The aircraft on both sides shaped the battle in important ways. The Spitfire was broadly comparable to the Bf 109E in speed and performance at most altitudes, though each type had particular strengths. The Hurricane, slower and less celebrated, was more numerous and accounted for the majority of German aircraft destroyed during the battle. German bomber crews flew in tight defensive formations that their fighter escorts were required to protect closely, a constraint that prevented the Bf 109 from exploiting its full advantages in air combat. The Bf-110 heavy fighter proved poorly suited to dogfighting and suffered heavy losses. One critical German disadvantage was fuel. The Bf-109 carried enough for only about 20 to 30 minutes of combat over southern England before it had to turn back toward France, leaving bombers dangerously vulnerable during any penetration that extended far inland. Germany launched its main air offensive, which the Luftwaffe called Adlerangriff, or Eagle Attack, in early August 1940. The initial phase focused on destroying Fighter Command by targeting its airfields, radar stations, and aircraft production facilities across southern England. Through August, raids struck sector airfields including Biggin Hill, Kenley, and Hornchurch repeatedly, and Fighter Command suffered severe attrition. During the 2 weeks ending on September 6th, the RAF lost 295 fighters destroyed and 171 more damaged, while pilot casualties were running at a rate the training pipelines struggled to replace. Some group commanders warned privately that if this phase of the battle continued for another 2 or 3 weeks, Fighter Command might lose its ability to mount coherent stance. Goering, however, grew impatient and was looking for a faster path to forcing Britain's submission. On the night of August 24th, German bombers accidentally struck residential areas of London while searching for other targets. Churchill ordered retaliatory raids on Berlin, which caused limited physical damage but infuriated Hitler. In response, Germany shifted its bombing effort away from Fighter Command's airfields and toward London, beginning what became known as the Blitz on September 7th. This decision is widely regarded as one of the most consequential German errors of the entire campaign. By redirecting attacks to London, the Luftwaffe relieved pressure on Fighter Command's airfields precisely when they were reaching a critical state of damage and disorganization. Sector stations that had been rendered partially inoperative by repeated raids were given time to repair facilities and restore communications. The breathing room provided by the change in German targeting allowed Fighter Command to stabilize its operations. September 15, 1940, later designated Battle of Britain Day, saw the largest German raid of the battle and proved a decisive turning point. Goering had assured Hitler that Fighter Command was nearly spent. Yet when German formations crossed the coast that afternoon in 2 major waves, they were met by squadron after squadron of British fighters. Early BBC reports claimed 185 German aircraft destroyed that day, a figure later revised down to 61, though German losses still significantly exceeded British ones. The psychological effect on German planners was considerable. Goering could not explain why Fighter Command continued to respond in such strength when his intelligence services had repeatedly told him it was on the verge of collapse. 2 days later, on September 17th, Hitler indefinitely postponed Operation Sea Lion, though heavy night bombing of British cities continued through the winter months. Several factors combined to produce the British outcome. Radar and the Dowding system gave Fighter Command an organizational advantage that partially offset German numerical superiority throughout the battle. Aircraft production under Lord Beaverbrook at the Ministry of Aircraft Production consistently outpaced German expectations, with Britain manufacturing more fighters per month than Germany during the critical summer period. Fighter Command also drew on pilots from across the British Commonwealth and occupied Europe. Poles, Czechs, Canadians, New Zealanders, South Africans, and others, who constituted a substantial portion of the total force. Polish squadrons in particular, flying with intense personal motivation after the destruction of their own country, recorded some of the highest aircraft kill rates of any units in Fighter Command during the campaign. These pilots brought combat experience from earlier battles that many younger British pilots still lacked. By October 1940, the daylight battle had effectively ended, with Germany abandoning large-scale daylight raids in favor of night bombing, against which the RAF's current capabilities were far less effective. The Luftwaffe had failed to achieve air superiority over Britain, and Operation Sea Lion was never revived. German losses during the battle amounted to approximately 1,887 aircraft destroyed, against British losses of around 1,547. Fighter Command lost 544 pilots killed, with hundreds more wounded or taken prisoner. British aircraft production during the battle replaced losses at a faster rate than Germany anticipated, meaning Fighter Command ended the battle with more serviceable aircraft than it had possessed at the start. The failure to subdue Britain left Germany with an undefeated enemy in the West, as planning shifted toward the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941.